Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Beemax channel. I'm Emma, and we're so happy you're here with us today.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. Whether you're studying at home, on the bus, or taking a short break, thank you for joining us.
Today's conversation is about something that almost every English learner experiences, feeling nervous when speaking English.
That's right. You might know a lot of English words. You might understand movies or podcasts. But when it's time to speak, your mind suddenly goes blank.
I know that feeling. Sometimes I know exactly what I want to say, but the moment someone looks at me, I become nervous.
You're definitely not alone. Many English learners feel the same way. Even people who speak English very well sometimes lose confidence.
Really? I always thought fluent speakers never felt nervous.
Actually, confidence doesn't come first. Practice comes first. Confidence grows every time you use the language.
That's an interesting way to think about it. So you're saying I don't need to wait until I feel confident before speaking?
Exactly. If you wait until you feel completely confident, you might wait forever. The best way to become confident is to start speaking, even if you make mistakes.
I think making mistakes is what scares most people. Nobody wants to sound silly.
That's true, but here's a question. When you hear someone speaking your language with a few mistakes, do you laugh at them?
No, of course not. I usually respect them because they're trying to learn.
Exactly. And most English speakers feel the same way. They care more about communication than perfect grammar.
I've never thought about it like that. Maybe I've been putting too much pressure on myself.
I think many learners do. They believe every sentence has to be perfect, but real conversations aren't perfect. Even native speakers make mistakes sometimes.
That actually makes me feel much better.
I'm glad to hear that, because in the next part, I'd like to share the biggest mistake I made when I first started speaking a new language.
Now you've made me curious. I can't wait to hear that story.
All right, let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I decided to learn Spanish. I was excited, and I studied almost every day. I learned new vocabulary, practiced grammar, and listened to podcasts.
That sounds like a great start. So what happened?
Well, one day, I finally had the chance to speak with a native Spanish speaker. I thought I was ready, but the moment the conversation started, I completely froze.
Really? You couldn't say anything?
I could only say a few simple words. My mind went completely blank. I forgot words that I had studied hundreds of times.
I know that feeling. It's so frustrating. You know the answer in your head, but somehow the words just won't come out.
Exactly. After that conversation, I felt disappointed. I kept thinking, maybe I'm just not good at learning languages.
I think many English learners have that same thought. Sometimes one bad experience makes us lose confidence.
That's true. But then I realized something important. The problem wasn't my English, or in that case, my Spanish. The problem was that I expected myself to be perfect.
That's a really high expectation, especially when you're still learning.
Exactly. I was afraid of making mistakes. So instead of focusing on the conversation, I was focusing on every single word.
That must have made you even more nervous.
It did. The more I worried about making mistakes, the more mistakes I made.
So how did you change that?
I changed one simple habit. Instead of trying to speak perfectly, I started trying to communicate clearly.
That's an interesting difference.
It changed everything. And believe it or not, a very kind stranger helped me realize that.
Now I'm curious. What did that person say?
The stranger smiled at me and said, "Don't worry about speaking perfectly. Just help me understand you." I'll never forget those words.
That's actually a beautiful piece of advice. Sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves that we forget the real purpose of a conversation.
Exactly. Language is a tool for communication. It isn't a test.
People aren't expecting you to be perfect, they just want to understand what you're trying to say.
I wish someone had told me that when I first started learning English. I was always afraid that people would judge my pronunciation.
Did that stop you from speaking?
Oh, definitely. There were so many times when I knew the answer to a question, but I stayed quiet because I was afraid of saying something wrong.
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes language learners make. They stay silent because they're waiting for the perfect sentence.
And while we're waiting, we're missing the chance to improve.
Exactly. The only way to become a better speaker is by speaking. Every conversation teaches you something new.
That reminds me of something my English teacher used to say. She always said, every mistake is proof that you're learning.
I love that. Instead of feeling embarrassed by mistakes, we should see them as progress.
I agree. Actually, when I think about it, I learn much more from my mistakes than from getting everything right.
That's exactly how confidence grows, not by avoiding mistakes, but by realizing that mistakes aren't the end of the world.
I think a lot of our listeners needed to hear that today.
I hope so, because there was one simple exercise that helped me become much more confident when speaking.
Now you've got my attention again. What was the exercise?
The exercise was surprisingly simple. Every day, I talked to myself in English for just 5 minutes.
Really? What did you talk about?
Anything that came to my mind. Sometimes I talked about my plans for the day. Other times I described what I was doing. For example, I'd say, I'm making breakfast. Now I'm washing the dishes. I'm getting ready for work.
I like that idea. It sounds easy because you don't need another person to practice with.
Exactly. There was no pressure. If I forgot a word, I could stop, think about it, and continue speaking.
Did it feel strange at first?
Oh, absolutely. The first few days felt a little awkward. I kept thinking, why am I talking to myself?
I think I would feel the same way.
But after a week, it started to feel normal. I noticed that speaking became easier. I didn't have to translate every sentence in my head anymore.
That's impressive. So the goal wasn't to speak perfectly, it was simply to become comfortable speaking.
Exactly. Confidence comes from repetition. The more you speak, the more natural it feels.
I think many people believe they need a speaking partner before they can improve.
Having a partner is wonderful, but it's not the only way to practice. You can make progress even when you're practicing alone.
That's encouraging. I think many of our listeners will feel more confident after hearing that.
I hope so. And there's another habit that helped me even more than talking to myself.
Now I'm curious again. What was it?
The habit was listening to English every single day. Not for hours, just 15 or 20 minutes.
Only 20 minutes? I thought you had to study for several hours to improve.
That's what I used to believe, but I realized that being consistent was much more important than studying for a long time once a week.
That makes a lot of sense. A little practice every day sounds much easier to manage.
Exactly. I listened to podcasts while walking, cooking, or cleaning my apartment. I wasn't trying to understand every single word. I was simply getting used to hearing the language.
Did that really help your speaking?
More than I expected. The more I listened, the more natural English started to sound. Little by little, common expressions stayed in my mind. Then one day, I noticed that I was using those expressions without even thinking about them.
That's amazing. So you weren't memorizing sentences, you were naturally becoming familiar with them.
Exactly. That's why I always tell people not to worry if they don't understand everything. Understanding comes with time.
I think that's something many learners need to hear. Sometimes we get frustrated because we don't understand every word in a conversation.
I felt the same way, but then I realized something. Even in my own language, I don't pay attention to every single word. I just focus on the overall message.
You're right. I've never thought about it that way before.
Learning a language is very similar. You don't have to catch every word. You just need to keep listening and trust the process.
I really like that advice. It's simple, practical, and much less stressful.
I'm glad you think so, because there was one conversation that showed me my English had improved much more than I realized.
Now I'm really interested. What happened during that conversation?
It happened when I was traveling abroad. One afternoon, I stopped at a small coffee shop because I wanted to take a break. I ordered a cup of coffee and found a quiet table near the window.
That sounds relaxing. So how did the conversation begin?
A man sitting at the next table smiled at me and asked if the seat across from me was available. I said, "Of course, please, have a seat."
And then?
A few minutes later, he asked where I was from. We started talking about travel, food, and our favorite places to visit.
Were you nervous at the beginning?
A little, but after the first few minutes, I stopped thinking about my grammar. I was just enjoying the conversation.
That's a big change compared to your story earlier.
Exactly. I wasn't trying to sound perfect anymore. I was simply sharing my thoughts.
How long did you talk?
Almost 30 minutes. The funny thing was, I didn't even realize how much English I was speaking.
That's amazing. Sometimes we improve without even noticing it.
That's exactly what happened. When we finished talking, I suddenly thought, wait, I just had a real conversation in English.
You must have felt so proud.
I really did. Not because my English was perfect, but because I was finally confident enough to communicate.
I think that's an important reminder. The goal isn't to speak like a native speaker. The goal is to connect with people.
I couldn't agree more. And you know what? That conversation taught me one lesson I'll never forget.
Now I'm curious again. What was that lesson?
The lesson was simple. People don't remember every word you say. They remember how you make them feel.
I really like that. It's something we often forget when we're learning a language.
Exactly. During that conversation, I made a few grammar mistakes. I even forgot some vocabulary, but the other person didn't seem to care. He smiled, listened carefully, and enjoyed talking with me.
So your mistakes didn't stop the conversation?
Not at all. The conversation kept going because we were interested in getting to know each other. Communication was much more important than perfection.
I think that's a powerful message. Sometimes we're so busy trying to sound perfect that we forget to simply enjoy the conversation.
That's true. The more relaxed you are, the more naturally your English comes out.
I can relate to that. Whenever I stop worrying about making mistakes, I notice that speaking becomes much easier.
Exactly. Confidence doesn't appear overnight. It grows every time you choose to speak instead of staying silent.
That's a great way to look at it. Every conversation is another chance to learn something new.
Absolutely. Even if you only learn one new word or one new expression, you've already made progress.
I hope everyone listening remembers that. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Be afraid of missing the opportunity to practice.
I couldn't agree more. And before we finish today's conversation, there's one final piece of advice I'd love to share with everyone.
That sounds like the perfect way to end today's episode. What's your advice?
My advice is simple. Don't wait until you feel confident. Start speaking today, even if it's just for a few minutes. Every small conversation is a step forward.
I love that advice. It reminds me that learning a language is a journey, not a race. Everyone learns at their own pace.
Exactly. Some days you'll feel like you're making great progress. Other days you might feel stuck. That's completely normal. The important thing is to keep going.
And remember, every mistake teaches you something new. So don't be embarrassed by your mistakes. Be proud that you're trying.
That's right. One day you'll look back and realize how much you've improved, just like I did after that conversation in the coffee shop.
Today's conversation has really inspired me. I think I'm going to spend a few minutes speaking English every day from now on.
That's a wonderful goal. And to everyone who's listening, we'd like to encourage you to do the same. Practice a little every day. Listen as much as you can. And most importantly, enjoy the process.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and learned something useful.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to come back for more English conversations here on Beemax channel. We'll have more interesting topics to help you improve your English naturally.
Take care of yourselves. Keep learning, keep smiling, and keep believing in your progress.
Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. Have a wonderful day.